sometimes we have to climb a mountain to hear what God has to say to us. So come, climb this mountain with me so that we can learn more about what God has to say to us, about God's blessing for us, and how we can be a blessing for others. We have made it to the top of the mountain. Let's listen in and see what Jesus has to say to us today. Today, we learn some of Jesus' most important teaching. Jesus had been spending a lot of time healing people. In addition to their physical hurts and pains, Jesus saw people also had broken hearts and unsteady hope. After healing so many people, Jesus decided to care for them in another way. So he led the people who had been following him to a mountain. Mountains had special meaning in Jesus' time. People believed mountains were holy places to connect with God, maybe because they reached up high into the sky. There are lots of stories in the Bible about people having a meaningful connection with God on a mountain. Can you think of any? Moses, Elijah, Abraham, Jesus. There are just so many stories of people in mountains. Jesus knew mountains reminded people of God's presence with them, so he chose a mountain as a good place to give an important sermon. A sermon is a talk meant to teach and help people grow in their relationship with God. People were so committed to Jesus that they climbed the mountain to listen. In this Sermon on the Mountain, one of Jesus's first recorded sermons, Jesus lists 9 ways people are blessed. To be blessed meant to be happy or satisfied. People often thought, and maybe people still think this, that being happy or content was a result of their situation in life, how life was going for them. But as we know, Jesus likes to turn what we think we know upside down and show us a new way. So let's read Jesus's teaching together. And this is what we call the Beatitudes, or the blessings. And it comes from Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 through 12. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you When people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account, rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. The people listening to Jesus were astonished by this teaching. Some were confused. Many were surprised. Some were truly relieved. People who were mourning and very sad were blessed, not just blessed, but they were happy to the fullest possibility that they could be. Meek, gentle people were going to receive power over the earth. This is the opposite of what their culture said. Their culture told them power and possessions were what made a person happy or blessed. Did you notice how each beatitude, blessing, seems to include two parts? First, Jesus makes a statement, then he gives a promise. For example, Jesus makes the statement, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." Then Jesus gives the promise, "For theirs is the kingdom of heaven." In each of these verses, Jesus names a group of people we wouldn't usually think of as happy or content, then offers them a promise for healing and hope right now, not just in the future. The way Jesus promises these blessings is his way of bringing God's kingdom to us here and now. And that is something to truly be grateful for. Before we transition to our next activity, I want to bless you. A blessing is something that you receive. So I want you to open your hands like you're about to receive a gift. I'm going to speak a blessing. And if you receive it, take this blessing and put it in your heart. So hear this blessing. You are blessed because you follow the way of Jesus all the way up the mountain. When we follow Jesus, we are blessed with incredible wisdom. Okay, so I want you to go ahead and take out your sheet. This is the sheet that an adult in your family will have printed. It would have been emailed to them and they can print it off for you. So I want you to go ahead and take this sheet. You're going to need some crayons or markers or colored pencils or whatever it is that you would like to color in this image while we sit and wonder a little bit about this text. So, as you heard today, the whole of Jesus's Sermon on the Mount. And I have some questions for you that I want you to think about. I want you to consider what you heard in this sermon. What surprised you about Jesus's sermon? Right? Were there words that surprised you? Were there ideas that surprised you? Things that maybe challenged what you thought Jesus would say? Or even what you've heard said in your world? What do you think it means to be blessed? What does that even mean? When Jesus says, "Blessed are they that mourn," what does that mean? What does it mean to receive a blessing like that? Now, I want you to put yourself into the shoes of the people who were sitting on that mountain listening to Jesus. How do you think the people hearing these promises felt as they heard Jesus talk? Were they surprised? Were they anxious? Were they grateful? Were they relieved? What do you think they felt? And do you think it mattered who they were in terms of how they felt when they heard Jesus share these promises? Here's a good one. what are some modern Beatitude ideas that you have? So clearly, this was written in the 1st century BCE, so a 1st century CE. So that was a really long time ago, right? What are some modern Beatitudes? When we think about what the promises that God has given us are, what do we think about our current life, our current world? What are some promises you think God would speak to people today? Would they be the same? Which ones? Which ones might be a little bit different? Do you think there'd be any other new ones that you could add? I want you to consider these questions as you continue coloring. Finish thinking about them and finish up coloring. And just wonder a little bit about the impact that this sermon has on your life, but also had on the lives of those who heard it. So finish up coloring and we'll move on to our next section, our activity. So we've been talking about climbing a mountain a lot, right? I even climbed a mountain for this study. And if you've ever been on a hike or you've ever climbed a mountain, you know that climbing can be really exhausting. And when you climb a mountain, sometimes you're gonna face challenges as you do that. If you've ever been on a hike and all of a sudden on the trail you come across a log that was fallen, right? Instead of, you can't just walk through it, you gotta go over it or under it, or maybe even sometimes around it, right? When I was hiking the mountain for this, we came to a trail that had a bunch of rocks and we had to sort of scramble over those rocks. And I was also hiking with a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and that presents its own challenges, right? So I'm gonna give you some climbing challenges, and I want you to think about these challenges and consider what unexpected blessings might come from these challenges. Because the thing is, sometimes when we're challenged, we can find in those challenges blessings we never even thought we would get, right? So I'm going to ask you some questions, and you can take this time. You can go get some crayons, you could get some paper, you could just decide that you want to act out these challenges in your own living room. There's so many different ways that you could respond to my questions here, but I want you to take time and respond to them in some way. For a lot of you, drawing pictures or writing a story is sometimes the best way, but some of you might want to embody this exercise a little bit. So feel free to act out what you think your responses would be. So each of these challenges can come with unexpected blessings. So let's start with this. You start a hike at 5 o'clock in the morning before the sun even comes up. I did this once, not starting a hike at 5. I ran a race that was a 24-hour race down at Pocahontas State Park. And so we were running on the trails. I think my legs started at like 2:30 or 3:30 in the morning. And so what unexpected blessings can come from starting out on a hike or being on a trail before the sun even comes up? There's certainly challenges in that. But what blessings could you find in that moment? Okay, so moving on from that, you've been hiking for an hour and your legs are sore. This is definitely a challenge, but what blessings can come from that particular challenge? You don't have any music. All of a sudden, you're in the middle of nowhere, right? Hiking, climbing this mountain, and your media player or your phone dies. You have no more, or you don't have reception, so you can't access Spotify or Pandora anymore. Do people even use Pandora still? Mostly Spotify, right? You don't have reception on the mountain. And so you don't have any music with you, and clearly you can't watch any TV shows. And so there is absolutely nothing to listen to. This can definitely be a challenge. So what's the blessing that could come in this challenge? You should never, ever hike alone, right? Don't ever climb a mountain on your own. You should always have a buddy with you. But you're hiking and your friend that's alongside you isn't hiking as quickly as you are. This would be me with Mr. John, right? I'm slow, Mr. John is fast. He has to put up with me. And I'm a challenge for him. So what is a blessing though that comes out of this challenge of having a friend who can't go nearly as fast as you can? So as you're hiking, as it's likely to do on a lot of these fall and it's definitely spring days when people go out to the trails. As you're hiking, light rain showers begin. This is certainly a challenge, especially if you're not wearing waterproof footwear, right? So the question though is what blessing could come from this moment, from being out with the light rain falling around you? Maybe there's a blessing there too. So I want you to continue thinking about these challenges. Figure out where the blessings could be. This is a really good exercise for when you face challenges just in your daily life, to be able to stop and think through the blessings that God has promised us even in the middle of those challenges. All right. Before we go and when we close out our time here together this week, I'd love to be able to pray with you. Prayers are these short rituals that help us create the sense of community, that even though you're there and I'm here, that together we can pray and lift up these words and ask God for God's blessing together. And that creates community. Prayer is an amazing thing that can help create community. So will you pray with me? God of hope, thank you for encouraging our hearts and strengthening our spirits with your promises. Please help us live your way as merciful, pure in heart peacemakers who bring your kingdom to earth here and now. Show us who needs your hope today and lead us to share it with them. Amen. Amen. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you next week when we start looking at each line of the Beatitudes and what those promises can tell us about God's promise for each of us and how we can share those promises with the world. Have a wonderful week. Bye.